as I mentioned before, I really strongly believe that just as electricity and water are considered public utilities, we're now in a world where internet should be considered a public utility. And we
Okay, Short Issues Podcast. We are here again Thursday morning doing political interviews. Today I'm interviewing a person running for State Senate in District 37, Naomi Hyman. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Brian. How are you?
I'm good. Why don't you introduce yourself, give us your background, and why you're running for State Senate?
So, as Brian said, I'm Naomi Hyman. I am running for Maryland State Senate, District 37. I have a long career of community service, both in professional capacities and in volunteer work. And it's that passion for serving my community that has always informed what I do in the world. Right now, it seems like the most important thing that I can do to serve the community is to run for office. Because we are in a situation where we are facing a lot of change and challenges. And we need somebody who can accept and address the fact that those things are happening rather than some of our alternative options for this seat who are more focused on denying or ignoring what's going on. My background is working class. I know the importance of actually creating real solutions for real people as opposed to scapegoating. So let's not look at what's really going on. Let's blame these other people for what's going on. When in fact, real families are struggling, and the reasons that they're struggling are not the reasons that are being offered by those who scapegoat. One thing that really touched me as a child had to do with where my father worked. He worked in a place that was between the train station and the bus station. So a lot of transient folks, a lot of homeless folks, a lot of what they called in the day hobos, which then, as now, were looked at negatively as if they had some kind of character flaw that kept them from being something else.
What city is this?
This was Pittsburgh.
Okay, just make
A
sure.
gritty working class city, and I was there during the decline of the steel industry. So yeah, I'm very familiar with the economic impact of what companies and communities of the decisions that they make. At any rate, he would sometimes take some clothing. We didn't have much, so that was a big deal. And he would take some clothing and to give to these folks who were often found at the back door to where he worked. And we were curious about that. We didn't have much. We didn't know why he was giving our stuff away. And he said that you really shouldn't judge why a person is where they is a person is where they are unless you've walked a mile in their shoes. And he says, I don't know what these people have been through, but clearly it's been hard. Clearly it's been a struggle, or they wouldn't be here. And I have a choice. I can ignore them or make it worse for them by demeaning them, or I can make life a little better for them and be a little kinder. Why choose to make it harder when you can make it a little kinder? And that always stuck with me. Why would you make it harder when you can make it kinder? Why would you judge and act on those judgments without knowing something about the person you were judging? Another thing that was really formative for me is the fact that I came up in a Holocaust surviving family. My grandmother was one of the few, well, really the only person to make it to the United States before the Second World War. And I grew up hearing about the letters that came from Europe, from her family, reporting normal things like the birth of children and weddings and what was new in the community, but then changing over to the new laws that had been enacted and what was going on in the communities. And as it got worse and worse and worse, my grandmother would send them letters, please come to us, we'll sponsor you, we'll find everything you need to start over. And they would say, no, it's not going to get that bad. It's not going to get that bad. We don't need to come. And
What region of Europe were they?
They were in Eastern Europe. They were in mostly in Lithuania, but
Lithuania? Okay.
yeah. And we all know what happened. It did get that bad, and nobody believed that it would. And so I guess I'm a little bit of a canary in a coal mine because of that. When I see the same kind of language being used, the same kind of scapegoating being used, the same way that anger is being inflamed um, by people who want to direct attention elsewhere, I need to speak up because it could get that bad. As much as we believe that it won't, it could unless we do something about it. Educationally, I actually have a political science degree, and I'm one of the few people that's running for office with such a degree.
No way. You're actually qualified?
I'm qualified.
Where'd you get that from?
I did undergraduate work at the University of Pittsburgh, and I did some graduate work at the University of Delaware.
Okay. Has that degree given you much use in the professional world?
Actually, there is no part of the world that isn't touched by politics, whether it's office politics or family politics. It's been very, very helpful. I'm actually a stepmom, and I gotta say, you want to talk about family politics? I got my stepkids who I adore when they were teenagers, so there was a lot to work out in that way. So yes, it's been useful in everything that I have ever done.
Good. Well, this is actually a perfect question then for a person with a political science degree. It's kind of a rudimentary one. But usually when we talk about senators, we usually talk about U.S. senators, and a lot of people don't know that there's state senators as well. So, which is what you're running for. So, could you compare and contrast how a state senator functions as opposed to a U.S. senator?
Absolutely. So a state senator represents an entire state. It's not based by region or locality. Each state has 2 senators, and they represent the entire state. Their focus is on their state as a whole and on national issues. A state senator in Maryland, at least, is a little bit different. We have 47 state senators divided into districts by population. And every time there is a new census, those districts are rearranged to keep the numbers of people in the district similar. So the current districts have about 130,000 people in them, which sounds like a lot, but it's really the equivalent of a large football stadium and a half. So it's a very reasonable amount of people. That means a state senator is representing, and we have 47 of those in Maryland. So each state senator is representing a very specific locality and a very large but also limited number of constituents. So the focus can be on constituent services, on local issues, on starting the local initiative, on supporting the local initiatives within the communities that encompass the district. In the case of District 37, it's all of Talbot County, it is all of Dorchester County, it's a portion of Caroline, and a portion of Wycomico. So even though that's a large region and it's one of the largest of the districts, it's still manageable in terms of a senator's ability to be in touch on the ground and dealing with local issues in a way that's really important, and being a funnel to make sure that any resources from the state or national resources that come through the states can get where it's needed most within the district, and to support those locally generated initiatives.
So, as being a representative of a large swath of people from different parts of Middle and Upper Eastern Shore and Lower Eastern Shore, what is your agenda for state senator? What would you like to get accomplished?
Well, infrastructure is a big part of what I hope to get to accomplish. To begin with, we have infrastructure in every aspect: roads, bridges, facilities, schools that have been neglected by policies that have starved governments of the resources that they need to make these changes. So, at the very first, I would want to make sure that we have safe roads, safe bridges, safe schools, all the safe facilities that we need, and to repair or replace what needs to be repaired or replaced. Fortunately, there's resources coming our way to do that through the Biden administration. And if elected, I would want to make sure that those resources get where they need to in District 37. In addition, green energy. I would want to focus on building a green energy infrastructure, not just to achieve the intention of transforming Maryland into a state in which most or all of its energy comes from renewable sources, but also as a source for jobs. We are a great place for solar. We are a great place for wind. I know there's complications with both of those, but I think there's ways that we can do it well and really benefit the communities. Broadband. I don't know anybody on the shore outside of a few towns and cities that have reliable, affordable access to broadband. Some places can't even get it. Again, we have resources coming our way. We want to make sure that it gets where it needs to go, that we can go the last mile to make sure that our rural citizens have access to the internet. It's going to be slow going to begin with. It's a matter of actually building the infrastructure for that. Uh, Ultimately, I would like to see it be treated as a utility, but that's a bigger proposition. So in the short term, I would just want to get it into the hands of everybody and make it affordable. Also, climate change, and in particular, mitigation. Because of where we are located, we have sinking shorelines. Dorchester County is especially vulnerable, but everywhere is. I'm in Talbot County. I look out in my backyard, and trees are dying left and right because as the water rises, more brackish water comes into my little patch of woods, and the trees can't survive on that. So we need to find ways to help relocate people. I'm thinking in particular of places like Smith Island, near and dear to my heart, but in real trouble from climate change. So we need to find ways to relocate people. We need to find ways to protect historical resources. We need to find ways to keep our waterfront towns safe and thriving. It's a big project. So green energy, broadband, repairing what's been or replacing what's been neglected, and mitigating climate change. Those would be the four things that I would most want to focus on.
Okay. Could we drill down a little bit on green and energy and infrastructure?
Sure.
In particular, what type of green energy and infrastructure developments would you like to see being done on the Eastern Shore?
I would like to see utility scale solar. There are environmental impacts, but they can be addressed. There's a lot of NIMBY resistance, not in my backyard resistance to it, but I think it is something that we have the sun for and we have the open space for that would help us provide some significant energy. Also, jobs. And wind. I know that people have questions about windmills off the water. Um, Personally, I don't mind them. I know that some people don't love them, but I think we're getting to the point of desperation that if we don't start making some compromises in order to create sustainable green energy, then we are going to only make climate change worse. So yes, there's compromises, environmental compromises, quality of life compromises, but I think we need to be looking at them because there's bigger issues at stake.
Okay, so what do you say to the Republicans that are deficit hawks that say, you're going to raise my taxes? You're just another liberal who's going to raise all the taxes on the Eastern Shore, and all the businesses are going to flight to somewhere else. What do you say to those people?
What I say to those people is they're flying already. They're flying already because we don't have broadband. They're flying already because in many cases our roads aren't where they need to be. They're flying already because we don't have the kind of workforce training that people need to match the needs of what's going on. I would put it to them in terms of investment. We're talking about an investment in the future of the community. You may not want government to be the investor, but somebody is going to. Businesses are, but not at the scale that's necessary, nor is it their job to provide the infrastructure. Um, I would say let's start thinking a little bit long term. We've seen for the last 40 years that what has that trickle down and supporters and deficit hawks, uh, the world they have created is not better. It's worse, and it's worse for more people.
Okay, so you've mentioned broadband a couple times. You want to increase access to affordable broadband. How do you plan to do that? How can poor people be able to afford good broadband internet on the Eastern Shore?
First step, as I said, is getting some of that infrastructure money directed to our rural communities so that we can go the last mile to even get it in place where they can have it. The second thing I would want to see is because we have a internet system that is based in private corporations, I would want to see those corporations, if they're going to get subsidies to extend their reach, I would want to see a quid pro quo where they would bring rates into more reasonable territory, since one of their costs will now be taken care of, and also to make internet available to everybody by subsidizing those who can't afford it. Another issue has been small communities that have had to pay. Maybe there's a group of 10 houses on a road, and they have paid to have the to have internet extended into their communities. And I'd like to see them reimbursed from some of this infrastructure funds. Well, it's been a real burden on people to be able to do that because it's quite expensive. As I mentioned before, I really strongly believe that just as electricity and water are considered public utilities, we're now in a world where internet should be considered a public utility, and we should be thinking of it in those terms. Uh, and as a lowly state senator, I can have a voice in that, but I can't make the difference that I'd like to make. But I will continue to be an advocate for it.
Okay. Um, Kind of on that note, because this is an issue right now, and Hogan a little while ago said he's doing another like $28 million grant to do another bridge study for a new
Yeah.
Bay Bridge. Where do you fall on the Bay Bridge issue? What should be done about needing a new bridge? Should it be diversified? Should it support a light rail? What do you think?
Oh, there's a part of me as an Eastern Shore person who loves my Eastern Shore the way it is that would like to not have it at all. But that ship has sailed.
Let's blow it up. I'm in that boat too.
um, the bridge is the infrastructure is not in good shape. Something needs to be done. So an option of doing nothing is only going to be tenable for a very short period of time. I am looking forward to attending one of the public hearings about the newest proposals, but I would very much like to see it diversified for light rail. I would like to make sure that whatever decision we make has doesn't make things harder on the communities that have the bridge at either end. So I lived for a while on Kent Island, and it used to take, I lived toward the southern end of Kent Island, and it used to take me 10 or 15 minutes. half an hour at most to get from the bottom of Kent Island up to Route 50. I've been out to see friends there recently. It can take up to an hour. It's a narrow peninsula, as many of our peninsulas are here on the shore. They can't support more roads. They can't support more traffic. So a big concern that I have is wherever we put it, how are we going to make sure that we have what we need to get the increase in numbers of people who are going to use it to get on both sides, to be able to do so without devastating communities on either side. Among other things, it can become an economic justice issue because often the communities that get raised to make room for these kinds of things are the communities of less wealth. It's just how it goes. Light rail would help, particularly if the light rail extended all the way to the shore. It would alleviate some of the traffic on the roads. That would certainly help with climate change. But frankly, I haven't seen a solution that I really like that I think addresses the economic, the financial, and the environmental issues in a thorough way.
Joe Biden just where is it? He's doing some student loan forgiveness finally.
Yes.
Forgiving 20,000 if you went to college on Pell Grants, 10,000 if you didn't receive Pell Grants. Means tested for people earning less than 125,000, and this is extended for one final time through December 31st. And it says if you have undergraduate loans, you can cap repayment at 5% of your monthly income. So what's your reaction to this? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Do you think it's enough, or do you think it's not enough?
I think it's too little. I think the cost of higher education has become excessive. And it's ridiculous that students have had to take on the level of debt, even at the state college level, to take on the level of debt that can impair their ability to have lives, to buy a house, to start a family, to start a business, to do the things that ostensibly college was supposed to help them do. So I agree with the income capping, but I would like to see more loan forgiveness for those who are really burdened by the amount of debt that they were encouraged in some cases, in some not so scrupulous ways, to take on in order to get an education that doesn't make the investment worthwhile.
What about your housing agenda? What's your housing agenda for the Eastern Shore?
My housing agenda is to change NIMBY to YIMBY, from not in my backyard to yes in my backyard, for affordable housing. And of course, to redefine what affordable housing means, because I don't know who's making these decisions out there about the definition of affordable housing, but I can't afford it. I couldn't afford to live where I live if I had to purchase now. Fortunately, we moved to the shore long before housing prices escalated. And then we have large, powerful groups of people, often but not exclusively wealthy, who really want to hold down the building of multifamily units, of apartments, of condos, of higher density housing, things that are also good for the environment, by the way, because it will change their quality of life, and they fear that it will drive down the cost of one of their major investments, which is their home. I think we really need to shift that. I think it's not enough to do things like debt forgiveness. We also need to be looking at wages. We need to be looking at housing if we expect the next generations to stay in Maryland. So I am in favor of judiciously situated, higher density housing. I particularly love infill projects that take advantage of areas that have already been abandoned, either because people have moved away, or we're seeing malls and shopping centers decline and go out of business. And those are usually centrally located places with parking, access to roads, access to public transportation where it exists. So to be using those sites to build in rather than greenfield building and destroying more of our environment.
So would you be in favor of government social housing for some of these unoccupied, empty mall parking lots and spaces like that? Is that what you're suggesting?
Not necessarily. I think we've seen mixed results for government housing over the years. We've seen some really disastrous projects. So I like public-private partnerships where they can be held responsible for development that works. Easton is an example. There's been some wonderful infill projects in Easton, and that's a public-private partnership. If we go to straight government housing, there's still stigma attached with that. And it can be detrimental to the people who are taking advantage of it. It is not necessarily the housing that meets the needs of people. So I don't have a specific proposal, but what I would support is housing that is in many ways indistinguishable from homes that people are living in that can pay the full rent or the mortgage, but that people can be subsidized in their ability to pay for that.
Where do you stand on the short-term rental situation on the Eastern Shore? There's a lot of Western Shore people that kind of treat housing over here as an asset, and it's leading to a lot of Airbnbs, and it's exacerbating the housing crisis over here because many affordable homes are bought up by these people and then rented out, which is taking away a home from a family that lives here and works here. So how do you feel about STRs?
As someone who occasionally rents an STR, I can't say that I'm completely against them, but they're not subject to the same kind of rules and regulations as a hotel, for example. So there can be real issues, even for the people that rent them, in terms of getting what they paid for, having somebody monitoring what they're doing on the property, how they're treating neighbors, so on and so forth. The driving up of prices is huge. It not only does it eliminate properties that people could buy, but it drives up rental prices as well. It also decimates community building because the people that own these houses don't live here. They don't vote here. They're not invested here. They don't want to pay local taxes here. So they're non-participants in the communities. I can think of a couple of communities right offhand where 60% of the homes are occupied part-time. So that's no way to build a community. That's no way to get to know your neighbors. That's no way to build a shared vision of the future. That's no way to build long-term thinking. That's no way to build education programs. We need to have people living in these houses. And if there's some short-term rentals under careful regulation, I could support it, but not at the scale that it's operating now.
So would you be in favor of stronger regulation, maybe extracting more fees or taxes? Because you said, as you've said, these people aren't paying taxes here.
So I'd start by looking at the occupancy taxes and other taxes that a hotel that one would pay when renting a hotel and that a hotel would have to pay into a community. I think we should have parity in treating vacation rentals by those same standards. So if a hotel is required to do those things, if a guest in a hotel is required to do those things, somebody hosting an Airbnb or a VRBO should also be required to do those things. I was very active in this discussion in Talbot County when I ran for county council 4 years ago. It's a very tough issue because of the vested interests, the real estate industry, people who want to have their vacation homes here, small businesses that rely on vacationers to purchase their products and services and eat in their restaurants. Um, what's doable and what I'd like to see done are going to be two very different things, but I would very much like to see more regulation in place. Of course, that's done at the local level. Each county is responsible for their short-term rental regulations, which makes it more complicated to address from a state level.
I kind of want to drill down a little bit, and this is only because you're a political science major a little bit. And we've kind of danced around this issue a little bit, but privatization of public goods. Um, you've kind of described instances in which broadband, for example, you describe as being a public good. Um, but with housing, you sort of seem to be like PPPs are okay, even though I would say that we have 40 years of data saying that PPPs aren't going to accommodate everybody. Okay, so how do you thread the needle of the PPP, of the privatization question? Because it seems like privatizations to me mostly benefit the private company, not the public. So
It's a complex question, as much of politics is, and sometimes it's the art of the possible. And I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. So if there seems, I would support full out government housing with subsidies for everybody who needed it that was created in such a way that residents were not ghettoized, were not we're in mixed communities so that people of varying income levels could be in the same place. I would love to see government initiatives that did that. In the political climate that we have, I don't know that that's possible. So I support the public private partnerships or the PPPs because it feels like that's what's doable in the short term. It's not what I want. I grew up in a neighborhood that was mixed race, mixed demographics, mixed socioeconomic. The richness of experience of interacting everywhere with people who were different than me. So I grew up in a really mixed neighborhood. We had socioeconomic diversity, we had racial diversity, we had religious diversity, we had people that needed uh, assistance, and we had people who were generous benefactors to the community, all in one community. So growing up in a place like that, it helped build a sense of democracy, of the fact that we're all in it together. It meant that I developed compassion for and was able to see the perspectives of people who weren't like me. It made us feel like we were all in it together. We don't have that anymore. We are such a segregated, and I don't just mean racially segregated. We are such a politically, socioeconomically segregated community at this point that it's hard to not think of the people who don't live near us, who don't look like us, as neighbors. It's hard to think of them as something as 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 it's easy to think of them as other. I I when that happens and we lose that empathy and we lose that sense of connection, we actually undermine democracy. We undermine community. We undermine that sense that we're all in it together. So, any housing solution that I would support, be it a public private partnership or a full out government support, I would want to make sure that it was built in such a way to encourage much more diverse communities so that we couldn't be so isolated as to think that we aren't like the others who actually are our neighbors and who actually are a part of our communities. It's not just about housing, it's about community. It's about making sure that jobs are near those communities.
Is there anything that I didn't ask about that you wanted to say, that people to know about you?
You had asked me in the questions to review about the role of faith in what I'm doing. And I would just like to say that I grew up in a really powerful faith community that actually walked its talk. And two things were ingrained in me from a very young age. One is a sense of justice, justice not as something out there, but as something that we were meant to pursue. Actually states in the book of Deuteronomy, it is something that we are required to do. There's also a concept, there's also a concept of healing the world. So the idea of pursuing justice and healing the world inform everything that I have done, everything that I do, and everything that I intend to do as a state senator or in any other role that I'm lucky to serve in terms of serving my community.
Could you shout out your socials, your website, where people can find and connect with you?
Absolutely. At www.naomihyman.com or Naomi Hyman, Naomi for 37 on Facebook. And sign up for my list. I'll keep you up to date with everything that we are doing. If you like what you're hearing, make a donation. You can do all of that at the website, naomihyman.com. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening.